Oh, new day, but same incredible conversation today. We're talking about the drop in civics education, among other things, on the other side.
Audio Jungle.
Oh, and welcome back to another episode of the South Star Classroom. That's Omar, that's Jubilee, that's Castillo, and somewhere in Jubilee's realm is the very famous that damn dog who might make an appearance. We just had a whole conversation about it. Omar and I was talking about the lineage and history of wolves and dogs, and I brought up roaches.
Smack about this
Different conversation for a different day, but I'm sure that damn dog will make an appearance. It needs to produce a show at some point because we talk about
what kind of 80s sitcom are you trying to start here?
I know.
Jubilee.
Alf.
And that
It is.
on
We got to bring back the magic of Alf.
Weekday.
And if you are aware of what Alf is, and you are our people, but we will go around in the circle and see how people are doing. Omar, let's start with you, man. You look good, brother. You might be being held hostage, but you look good. I like it.
Man, I got this white ass background. I'm holding myself hostage in my neutral ass office here at Central Office, man. Good, man. Like it's Tuesday. It's Tuesday. Welcome everybody to the Tuesday feed. Yes. I'm excited that we're moving over to Tuesday. We're wrapping up the year, man. So like we're talking about recruiting for next year. We're talking about hiring for next year. It's all like we're already at the year-end wrap-up. And I think very exciting. We are a consulting firm first, ladies and gentlemen, and a podcast second. And I am putting my money where my mouth is. We got the beard of knowledge, Mr. David Castillo, coming by to EPLA at the end of May to do some work with us and get this whole thing started with the South Star Classroom consulting firm. So I'm putting my money where my mouth is and hiring South Star myself. So hire us. We'll come and do amazing work for you all. But things are good, man. I'm working on the book. Things are going really well. How's everything going for everybody else here today?
Man, well, let's throw it on over to Jude, man. How you doing?
Listen, after you done, assaulted my dog and reached into that damn dog. Let me tell you something. I'm over here sipping on
my this escalated quickly.
And minding my business. That's what I'm over here
doing.
I
have never said anything wrong or bad about that damn dog. I just refuse to talk to it like it's a human like you do. You talk to that dog.
Let me tell y'all. So before the show, here comes Charles, right? And I'm saying whatever I'm saying. I'm singing and I'm talking to Meadow. And he goes, "Oh, Jube, I ain't gonna be able to hear you till I put my headphones in." Then when he finally puts them in, he realizes that I was talking to that damn dog. And that's it. So
full conversation.
Like, that's not a human. It's not a human. Well, in my world, she is. Instead of paws, she has hands. Instead of needing to go for what, she has to use the bathroom. And it is what it is.
I understand that. Listen, man, if you like it, I love
that
it.
Damn dog coming to you every Thursdays at UPN, everybody. All right.
Absolutely. If two homeboys in outer space got a show, then Jubilee and that damn dog can get one. How you doing, David?
Yeah. I am doing good. Looking forward to today's show. And before we get into that, just general check-in. We started standardized testing here at my kid's school. He did his first of 2 days of ELA. I think it went pretty well. I just told him, don't worry about it. This stuff doesn't matter to anybody. Just go in and do ABC, CDE, ABC. Do a pattern on the Scantron. That's what you got to do.
Abacadabra.
Exactly. Have some fun. Have some fun.
This is my kind of parenting.
Doesn't matter.
we message it like, this is not going to impact your grade, but it's really important to just show like what you've learned over the years and just do your best. some basic, study skills, test interpretation, a couple little strategies here and there, and he's really not that stressed out about it. So I'm happy for him. And then just on the non Southern California front, just a quick update for our listeners. The strike in Oakland is continuing. I'm hearing a lot of associates and friends and community members up there, and people are pissed. We're starting to see a pretty fractured, fracturing. Like, I think in years past, people have always just given it to the teachers and say, hey, you know what, if you're striking, we're going to strike with you. But now we have principals, we have parents that are running PTAs that are coming out of the woodwork and being like, this is too much. Like, they've met the salary demands, and now they want, pick out two. I'm going to cherry pick two demands from this list of common goods that I love that comment. It's okay. Back on the thought. There's a list of common goods that the union put together. They didn't ask parents or students. This is like from the adults. This is from the grab bag of the CTA and the NEA and the AFT. One of them is a demand around the school district committing to like planting certain types of drought tolerant trees on all of the campuses because of climate change. It's like a little demand. They want them to plant trees, and I get it. They should probably do that, but is it worth keeping kids out of school until the district purchases all drought tolerant plants and shrubbery and trees? No. Number two is, there are a fair amount of students in Oakland that would be categorized as being unhoused. A lot of transition. It's a big issue in the Bay Area and in Oakland. Well, one of the community demands is that the district will use underutilized district space to house students and their families that are unhoused. I don't know of any other school district in the country that does that. Has created housing for, I'm not saying it's not the responsibility. I'm saying it sounds like it's more of a city responsibility. And you know what this really is, I'll tell you, and then I'll move on for my check-in. It's a power play so that they can say that we're not going to share any facilities with charter schools because our students that are unhoused deserve housing before we're going to share a square foot with a public charter school entity and public charter school students, many of whom are unhoused too and members of the community. So it's all smoke and mirrors. It's ridiculous, and people are, like I said, people are upset. Their kids are out of school, and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. I think it's an oncoming train. They're probably going to be out for the rest of the year, and that's really sad.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. I've been following it too. I've talked about it on a few other podcasts that I've been guest on, and it's just and did this like private talk with some nationally board certified teachers, and the situation in Oakland came up, and I was very honest. And listen, man, if those were pure thoughts, that would be very, very progressive. I don't know how that's supposed to work in a structurally deficient school district that has had a structural deficit for the last 30 plus years. It just really feels like it's just kind of like bullying at this point, and dropping in some things that they know they might not be able to get, but have it be so out the sphere that you can only look bad trying to negotiate against it, right? Because what are you gonna do, David? You about to negotiate against homeless kids? So in a school that's utilized with 150 students in a building that holds 500, like, are they gonna have like kids living like? I don't understand. But hey man, Godspeed, Oakland. Godspeed. I'm here. Tuesday is a big shift. I'm excited about it. I didn't realize how much of my world would shift when we made that change. So moved a bunch of check-ins. A flight got moved. I'm gonna just take that flight tomorrow and do a quick turnaround Thursday. But we are here Tuesdays now, and if you are only able to do Fridays, don't fret. We will do a here at the same time Friday, and you will be able to find some of us, if not all of us, in the chat being able to respond to you and interact with you. But I'm very excited for today, and I'm very excited for just all the good things that's happening around the South Star Classroom. And I'm excited for today's lesson because David got a doozy for it. So I'm just gonna give you the screen and start you off, brother. It's a lot going on.
All right. Is everybody checked in? Is everybody?
Yeah, I was last, I think, right?
Okay, great. Excellent. Okay, cool. All right. So, yeah, and again, we had quite a bit of social media activity ahead of today's show. So I think people are catching on that we're on a new day, same time with the Tuesday live show, and then a premiere of the live show on Friday. And yeah, let's see what. Hopefully, it's an interesting thought. You know, when I was working in schools and working either as a teacher or principal, the last thing I wanted to do on a Friday afternoon is talk about education, right? And so I'm kind of surprised it's taken us that long to like make the change, you know. But I think hopefully Tuesday is better for our audience. And so like Friday afternoons, you can just not talk about education unless you want to watch our premiere. So if you are listening in the chat, if you're here, make sure that you're commenting. We'll do our best to respond to your comments. Thank you all for being here. Today we're going to talk about a recent release of what's called what is it called? The Health Scorecard or something like that. America's Report Card, which is the National Assessment for Educational Progress, commonly referred to as the NAEP. People have heard of it. NAEP. That's what we are talking about today. It is a national assessment that's given twice every 2 years, right? And there's different components of the NAEP. I won't get into the details. There's like a long-term longitudinal NAEP, and then there's a short-term regular NAEP. And that's what we're talking about today, is just the regular test that's administered twice a year. And we are talking about a specific cut of that data that looks at 8th grade U.S. history and civics curriculum. Okay, we're talking about 8th grade U.S. history. And this assessment is not given to every student. The NAEP, certain schools are selected for NAEP. So Omar School might be selected. Jubilee, the school that your children tend to, might be selected. And then it's not all the kids. It's like specific subjects, grade levels, and then even within that, it's a subset of children. So again, this is more like a national spotlight. And what we can see with the most recent, so looking at this graph that Charles has up right now, this is from the good people, freedom-loving people at AEI, American Enterprise Institute.
We're gonna have to give context to that, brother. Go ahead.
Well, this is just data, so we'll just look at the data. Anybody can present this. Let's see. When you look at these lines, this goes back to 2000. Okay, this is about a 20-year from left to right time frame that we're looking at. And when we talk about percentiles, we're talking about students that are performing in the lowest 10%, students that are, and then everything in between, all the way up to students that are performing in the higher, the 90th percentile. These are the top performers on this particular assessment, right? And what you can see over time is that, a couple of takeaways from this, and this is not disaggregated by race. We're not going to get into that today, but we'll make a couple of assumptions that I believe are fair. Looking at this, you see a 20-year historical look back. This is not longitudinal in that every 2 years, different 8th graders are taking this test. So this is like what you would call a dipstick. Goes in, comes out, you check the oil. Oh, low on oil, let's put it back in. 2 more years, we're out of oil. We're dry, What this looks like, and there's 2 graphs here, but the first graph says that scores seem to have peaked in and around 2014, right? You see that kind of all of those different percentiles are kind of, the high point is in and around 2014, right? And then subsequently, you see a pretty continuous decline. So I'm going to stop there, because in addition to talking about this particular data, and for people that are listening and for people that will listen, is the NAEP is loosely based on what's called the national standards, or what used to be called the Common Core, right? So there's a national I mean, the state of the current Common Core, if you ask 10 people, they're going to give you 10 different answers. But there is a national academic framework that the national assessment that we're looking at here is based on. However, when you go to individual states, I will use my state as an example. In California, we don't have an 8th grade standardized test anymore. We used to. So we actually don't even measure in California, 8th grade US history. And so that means there's a national framework. Mm-hmm. California has a framework for US history for 8th grade. We don't know how well it's being implemented or not. The only way we can tell is by looking at this NAEP. So every state has their own state standards that are loosely based on national standards. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because prior to the Common Core in California, we used to actually measure almost every grade level in math, every grade level in English language arts, several grade levels in social sciences, and in science. So we actually had 4 different state assessments. When the Common Core came in, now we're down to 2, which is essentially math and ELA. So we don't even measure at a state level in California how well civics and history education is being taught. The question here is, and there's a saying that says, in schools and beyond, the things that matter to us, we should measure. And if we're not measuring US history in several of our states, California being included, like, does US history matter? The reason I'm pointing at this graph that Charles has up is because essentially my interpretation of this is you have scores rising, votes are all rising. And actually we'll look at another graph that shows the lowest 10th percentile are students that were low performers actually grew faster leading up to 2014. You can see this graph. And then after 2014, they actually fell further, right? So what was happening in and around this time was the dismantling of No Child Left Behind, which was a national accountability framework that you can actually look here and say, well, at least in this one subject, and we look across the others, it had an impact on student outcomes. NCLB gets a really bad rap, maybe because it's tied to Bush, I'm not really sure. But that kind of accountability actually led to increased student outcomes.
Do you want me to click the other ones too, or?
No, this is good right here. This is good right here, because I think we're going to stop right here. And so given the kind of the disarray of the assessment landscape, I don't know what's happening in where you're at, Charles, or in the regions that you're at, and Omar can share, and Jubilee can share. My question to you at this point is, looking at the data, what is your assessment? What is your quick take on how relevant this assessment even is?
I mean, and it might be having just even some questions, like you said. So 2014 was the year that you said that they got rid of No Child Left Behind.
I mean, that was post, but these are like this is my interpretation. They're like after effects,
right? Like right after it,
yeah.
Right? So when was No Child Left Behind? When did it officially end?
I think the exact year, probably somewhere around 2010, 12.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you had like a grace period where nothing was happening, but you can still see some growth in the test scores on this assessment. So it's when Common Core was fully implemented that you actually start to see some of the declines. So yeah, it's a national assessment. The content hasn't really changed, but in different states, the content has changed and the assessments have changed. So like, is this still a valid assessment tool? What is your take on that based on what you're seeing?
And brother, and
should we be concerned?
I want to make sure I didn't put your questions in out of order. It was this one, and why are students currently experiencing large drops? I don't know which one you want us to go at.
This is the question number 2.
Okay, here you go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Got you. I mean, I can take a crack at it. I mean, I think it's gonna be interesting fodder and interesting conversation. So you pointed out like that there was a standard, a national standard, regardless of how people felt about it. And also there's always been some type of ESEA type of like thing that was happening because Obama had his own when he came in. And now a lot of people are kind of saying that he was conservative on education because of his appeal towards choice. So not sure what's going to happen in this next election or continue to happen under Biden. But I guess one of the quick things I would say is I would be interested to see what other things is going on. But what it sounds like just from context clues is that there was this extreme pressure to kind of get all these up because you want to get this federal funding. And then as soon as that was gone, as soon as that promise of additional monies or having to do certain things to get those additional monies, it seems like a lot of places nationally kind of dropped their civics or U.S. history training, or maybe they changed the curriculum altogether. Maybe the whole, maybe what the federal standard was no longer the standard by state, and states got to get some of that power back. But I see Jube's hand going up, so let me yield. Your hand was up, right? You was trying to go, right? See, this is why I'd be afraid to do this show with Jube, y'all, because like we wanted, like, it's like, okay, go ahead, and then you're gonna be like, y'all see, the boys is bullying me.
The hand was up.
I don't want that smoke.
But once again, that damn dog came in.
You know, I said something about the dog.
The situation. That damn dog. UPN every Thursday, 7 p.m.
Jubilee, the floor is yours. If you were asking for the floor.
I wasn't asking for the floor, but I'll take the floor, Doc.
Wait, did you not raise? Did we all not see you raise your hand?
I was rubbing the back of my head because I'm thinking about
I feel like I'm in a detention class right now. Like, go ahead. We saw you raising your hand, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
By the way, Jubilee, you're going. Did you check in? Did we find out how you were at all? Or did we just skip over that?
I was drinking my tea and minding my business. That's what I said. That was my check-in.
All right.
My damn tea every Thursday.
We're going to give her the screen.
I want to talk about Betsy DeVos, whose name I don't, I don't like to say.
Betsy DeVos, yeah.
DeVos, right. You see how that was all messed up? Just like the way that she thinks about education is messed up. And I want to talk about this tweet. Students' knowledge of U.S. history is at an all-time low. This is what you get when you teach CRT, DEI, and the 1619 Project instead of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Gettysburg Address. Now, there's so many places we could go with that, but I'm not going. All I want to say is we have been, as Americans, behind the 8 ball for decades. This is not new. This is the fact that we have experienced these declines in our scores. This is not new. None of it is new. It's not new in reading. It's not new in math. And if we use the NAEP as the main metric, there have been like some increases, but we've seen steady decline since 2012. 8 years before COVID hit our world and turned it upside down.
Right.
So these large drops to me are indicative of a few things that we are missing, I believe, as a nation. Right. And again, I'm not going to say that I'm 100% a proponent for a national curriculum, but here we go back to this same point. I say every episode, can we get the stakeholders at the table to talk about what do we believe an American child should know? And then on the metric side, how do we want to assess that? To me, the large drops are indicative of a knowledge gap in America. It is indicative of the fact that we can't agree how to teach reading. It is indicative of the fact that teachers' unions, right, are dictating what teachers are able to do, are not able to do, and that the children end up falling to the wayside. And we end up inheriting poor instruction, right, from year after year. We end up not having adequate curriculum that's really going to address the needs of every child. And therefore, years later, we end up with huge declines overall. And no matter what metric you look at, we end up with these large drops. That's my submission.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Oh, if you got something to add there.
No, I mean I can go. Like I'm going to come at this from a much more like political and conspiratorial position, because that's what I do on this show here. I think a couple things. One, when you see the radical decline in U.S. history scores, one, people will point and be like, hey, we're not teaching civics, we're not teaching social studies anymore. What's going on? And like, I would arguably say, like, yeah, that's been a thing. Civics has dropped off, arts dropped off. I get it. We're trying to increase literacy in math, but if we were seeing these extraordinarily accelerated literacy rates growing and math rates growing, I'd be like, well, see, like this is why. But we're still seeing literacy drop off and we're seeing this drop off. And it makes me very curious about a few things. So one, to answer, or I don't want to say to answer, but in response to Jubilee, look, I'm with you. I am all about a US curriculum across every state. So if kids move, they have accessibility so that we can collaborate. But I got to tell you, sadly, and I don't agree with this, the reason there isn't one is because Texas is the culprit. Texas is making too much money from their damn textbooks, and we're trying to predominate the damn market. But I will tell you this, look at what's going on in Texas. Like I ran for state board because I was like, can we just like not like, how about we actually help kids? At least that we could do to help kids is how about we just stop this book banning Nazi scenario that they got going on. I'm like, really, book burning? Like we're back to Nazi Germany here. We're back to burning like, The Bluest Eye and Catcher in the Rye. Like, are we regressing as a society? But Texas is really implicit about this because the same people that are banning books are the same people that are trying to put Jesus into books, that are the same people that want to eliminate Thurgood Marshall from the books and replace it with Newt Gingrich. You see where I'm going with this? Texas isn't just trying to insert itself into the economics of ensuring that people are buying their books to make money. They're doing this as a political strategy to ensure that their books are the ones that are erasing any kind of anti-US history or Black history or Chicano history and redubbing it in the name of white Christian WASPs. That is the expressed intent of the GOP in Texas. So what we're looking at here are two different debates. One is what is going on educationally that we need to solve, but how is that in a fight with the political motivations that Texas has to control not just the economics of textbooks, but the actual curriculum, using it as a mechanism for brainwashing. And that is exactly in stride with what Betsy DeVos said about we got to be teaching the Constitution. It's like, yeah, I'm all for the Constitution. Like, listen, Betsy, you couldn't tell the difference between growth and raw scores during the Senate committee trial when you were getting appointed in front of Al Franken. You think you know what CTR is or like the 1619 project is? You didn't know the basics of education.
CTR.
And now I'm expecting,
CTR.
CRT, yeah, critical race.
That's how she probably refers to it. Yeah,
critical race theory, CRT. You think this woman knows jack shit about the 1619 project? Anything else? She can even talk about the basics of education. Nah, this is a political move, man. I want to get y'all's take on that.
Yeah,
but
so
I thought
Charles,
this is a huge reason to the minus shit.
Yeah.
So
you control
tweet, right?
social studies curriculum. You can control the political motivations of this country.
So I think what we're hearing is that Omar's agreeing with Betsy DeVos on one reason why these scores, because like CRT, DEI, and the 1619 project are being taught instead of the core fundamentals. But all of this stuff has only come up in the last couple of years, right? Mm-hmm. But when we actually look at the scores, they've been steadily dropping for quite some time. So I think I don't think she has any actual data to back up this statement. And on Twitter, you don't need data. You can just say whatever the hell
knowledge.
you
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I mean,
so,
but this isn't even profound though, right? I mean, like one,
no.
multiple
point.
things can happen. Like it's not one lesson, right? Like I think that you should be learning about the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's incredibly important. And you can also teach about what was happening during those times.
Yes.
And I think that that's like it's just a false binary, it's a false equivalency. And I just think that but it's
a cheap shot.
I mean, but you gotta know what this is though, right? I mean, this is people just being on code for what they're working towards, right? Like this, she is a part, like there's a large culture war. And there are extremes on both sides of this thing, and either side is going to take every opportunity that they can to drive home a point. And luckily for her, on her side, it's easy to stoke those fears, right? Like again, white families are afraid that their kids are going to go to school and be told that they're evil, that they're racist, that they're this. They afraid to have to answer certain questions that are coming back home to them. It's throwing off things for them, and it's easy to stoke those fears. This is like a fire in California. You just need a spark, and then you on fire for 30 days. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And I think that's right. That's a tactic, and we have to just be aware when tactics are being deployed. And we can have an emotional response, but we also need to have a strategic response. Like, okay, let me understand. Let's make sure we know what's happening here. I don't know if Betsy DeVos actually cares that much about U.S. history scores. I don't know if she's just like chomping at the bit every year and they come out. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I don't know, right? I have no idea. But the point is, for the people that's listening here, and I think why we even do this show is, it's like when David asked that great question about these scores dropping, I'm thinking of the parents or the people that watch this show that don't work in education. And what that means is listen, it's being failed. We're being failed across the country. It's not just black kids, not just brown kids, not just poor kids. Kids in public and schools in general, they had a decline once there was no longer a federal mandate about a standard that needed to be met in order to get federal funding. And I think that was one of the things that David was hinting on, is like, that the government should be controlling like what curriculums are, but that without a standard, these are the things that you get.
Right. And the other thing about No Child Left Behind, I'll say one thing and then Jubilee, is the other interesting thing about No Child Left Behind is that it actually there was a point system, and you would actually get more points tacked onto your API score if you were able to move students up along the trajectory, starting with students that are like your lowest performing students. Like that's where you actually got like double or triple points. So what would we do as a school? We would focus on our students that were underperforming on these assessments, and we would provide them with tutoring and extra support. And it's a very different kind of model, and I think that's why you see the percentiles that you do, because it's a system that rewarded schools on an accountability system when attention was being placed on students that were the furthest from opportunity. I'll leave that there. Jubilee.
I forgot what I was going to say, but I just every time I listen to it, it's just like I'm always trying to get to the root of it, like, and it's got me thinking about No Child Left Behind, but it's also got me thinking about the Common Core and the failure thereof. You know what I'm saying? And reading that tweet for how you say her last name, DeVos?
Yeah.
Divorce DeVos.
Wow.
When I think about that tweet, I'm like, I watch TikTok, and sometimes they got these funny people going around with a microphone, and they're like, so tell me what continent is the country of Madagascar near? And they asked 58 people, and they're like, Asia, Brooklyn. Though the answers are the absolute worst. No matter what the question is, no matter what the race that you could ask a white kid, like let's go ask a white kid. So tell me all about the Gettysburg Address. Tell me about, the Constitution, and tell me about, like, come on, tell me what you know. I think that so many of them would be stumped, right? So it's just like, let's stop covering up just as a nation, right? And because education is so highly politicized, it's like, always covering up the root. The root is that we haven't gotten a handle on what strong instruction looks like. We haven't gotten a handle on how do we teach reading. We went from whole language to, oh, we just need phonemic awareness, to back to whole language, to, oh, we need to focus on reading comprehension, but we need to do so void of teaching content. Right? Like, I mean, there's so many things that feed into why. And when we're looking at civic scores and we're looking at high school scores, what we're really looking at are third grade scores. We're looking at first grade scores. We're looking at the gaps that they left elementary school with. And those gaps continue to widen. And now they're in high school, like, oh, Japan is located in South Africa. And, you know, like, people have no clue. So it's just like, when we look at it doesn't matter the metric. I know that NAEP is the one we're referring to today, but if we looked at state measures, right? If we looked at, school district, they have interim assessments or some other kind of assessment, I think we would be seeing the same trend. And the trend is connected to the fact that we devalued social studies, we devalued science, and we increased our focus on reading comprehension without content because of a metric that was attached to it, such as, or an incentive attached to it, such as No Child Left Behind with the points or whatever. So now when you look at the instructional day, where you used to have it balanced, okay, we're going to spend 45 minutes reading, 45 minutes math. Oh, now we're spending 180 minutes reading now, honey, because we got to learn how to comprehend what we're reading. And, maybe we'll spend 15 minutes on social studies if we get to it. This has been happening for decades. Let's get to the root of it.
Well, Jubilee, I got a question for you. I had a point, but the question I would ask is, like, I think that's a good message for educators and for administrators, right? Admins. If you're just a parent, though, right? If you don't work in education, you don't work in the school, and you hearing this or you dealing with this, like, you know what I'm saying? I mean, what advice do we have for those parents or those, you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's like, hey, like, can you make sure that my kid is actually learning about X, Y, and Z? I mean, I got some other thoughts about it, but I ain't mean to cut you off, David.
No, I mean, I want to hear Jubilee's response. Yeah, that's a good question.
Listen, one side of me is save your damn kids and homeschool them, because what's you say is, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong screen.
You good? Go ahead.
Okay. No, one part of me is like, save your kids and homeschool them. You know what I mean? I have two screens, so I'm sorry. I'm supposed to be looking here and I'm looking down. The other side of me is ask for the receipts, ask for the documentation. Yeah. What's the scope and sequence? Yep. You know what I mean? What curriculum are you using? Mm-hmm. And I know, again, right, as a working parent, I understand that you can't always be up at the school, like at every single meeting or what have you. But I do feel like at the very least, there's a baseline toolkit that every parent needs. And that is, what the heck are you teaching my kid? And and put it in my hands. Right. And so as a principal, that's something that we were really intentional about doing, right? Sitting down with parents. This is the curriculum we use. Here are the other pieces, that we use to supplement. Here's why. Here's the marking periods. Here's the end or the outcomes that we're hoping to achieve with your child, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, even if a parent is not educated, working 78 jobs or what have you, just the question alone raises the level of accountability for a school. A parent that leads with inquiry, right, is an armed parent, because at least you're curious about what is my child learning, what's going on here, and that raises the level of accountability.
So I feel like we're getting into some of the structural issues, and a school or a district or even a charter school, they're not going to be able to answer that question, Jubilee, if they don't have a clearly laid out like curriculum, right? Like what is my child supposed to be learning by the end of the fourth grade? Well, we're not really sure, so then what are you teaching? So I think that's definitely a challenge. I agree with you 100% when we shifted to the Common Core, like we went away, a lot of states went away from assessing all 4 core subject areas towards improperly focusing on literacy, right? I mean, not that it's improper to focus on literacy, but like big systems are just finding out now, what an effective literacy curriculum looks like, and they're implementing it finally. But If you put ELA and mathematics at the forefront, it is going to drive your budget. It's going to drive your schedule. It's going to drive your professional development. It's going to become, how you communicate about, success. And if you stop measuring those other subjects, you will slowly start to that content will erode. And social science, history, civics is a very content-rich, knowledge-rich subject, but you can't access any of it if you can't understand it, if you can't read it, if you can't interpret it. So it's definitely tied to like literacy, 100%. A couple of other structural issues that I'd like to call out are just the general quality of state standards. California actually has some decent standards, but if you look across the board, there's a couple of reports that have come out. Very few states, if you look at a national report card, come out with anything close to having exemplary standards for U.S. history and civics. That's an issue. So the bar that they're trying to reach isn't even a high bar. It might not even be a clear bar. You might not even know where the bar is. Number two, another point is curriculum. Like Omar was getting to this, general access to high quality aligned curriculum is a challenge. Even today, I taught U.S. history. I had to make my own books. I chose the big Houghton Mifflin, and then Liza, my teacher, told me, and Howard Zinn in the middle. I had to create my own curriculum. It wasn't one book. So I think there's a whole question here around actual content and curriculum and materials. And there's a couple more points, but I'll just say another one. And this, I don't know how relevant this is to other states, but in California, you can literally have a degree in anthropology and be assigned to teach U.S. history, economics, American government. So we don't have a clear articulation of in the teacher preparation side of what you actually study in college and what you're an expert in versus oh yeah, you're good. You did a social science thing at somewhere. You can teach this subject, but there's actually, so that lowers the bar. It's not a teacher issue. It's a structural issue around the kinds of adults that we put in front of children that are going to teach a specific type of curriculum. And most of them are just not experts in it. And so you're going to get watered down instruction and you're going to get results that look like, what we're seeing here. So there's definitely structural issues that have nothing to do with CRT or DEI or the 1619 project. If the 1619 project were published, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and I was teaching, it would be on the shelf. We'd all have it, right?
I mean, that's called education, man. Listen, if there's a curriculum, and then there are theorists that have arguments against that curriculum, you know what you do? When you become a doctoral student, right? You have to look at every single argument. You have to read. You have to take in those things. You have to learn how to discern and do all that stuff. I would say this to parents, and I would say this, even to educators that are listening, right? Any federal regulation is usually, think of it as this is the floor. The floor. This is where you should have this stuff covered. You know what I'm saying? But you can go beyond that. You should be able to go beyond that. I actually had a history teacher who ended up being a debate coach, but he taught us what we had to do in our civics class. But then he got us these AP with his own money too, might I add. But he got us these college history books that had a different level of depth, and he wanted to expose us to things. And that's the only class that I'd ever took that even remotely prepared me for what college or grad school would be like. And I appreciate it. It was annoying at the time, but I appreciate what he was trying to do. That was the first time I seen arguments about history or different recounts. And it's just oh, this is how the academic process rolls. But for parents, it is not out of pocket for you to say at the beginning of the year, hey, at the end of the year, at the end of the semester, what are the things that my kid's going to know that they don't know now? And then track towards that. These are things that you can help. In work offices, we might say manage up. So here's a way that you can kind of manage up at your school. And now I will say this, if you ask a damn teacher what kids should know at the end of their semester or the school year, and they ain't got an answer for you, then you need to be making a beeline to that principal's office or to your district office, a charter office, a private school, or the what's the person name at the Catholic school that runs it? The diocese or whatever, right? Like you should be heading there next, because that means that classroom has no real standard. They're there to babysit your kid, and you don't need a babysitter. You need somebody to educate. So that's what I would kind of say in this entire conversation around parents that might be listening to us and feel powerless in the moment.
Right, but I want to ask a question, just very basic, like I'm the common man in this scenario, because I mean I have an answer for it, but who cares? No, honestly, like let's just get to the core of the issue. Who gives a shit? Like, so who, like, I'm a parent, and it's like, who cares about John Hancock and the U.S. Constitution, or the Declaration of Independence, or the Gettysburg Address, for that matter? What's the point? So I'm an educator. I want to make sure my kids are learning how to read. Like, dude, cool. I'll just scratch social studies because I don't see a real point to it whatsoever. Who cares if these kids are doing poorly on it? I care that they read and they're critically thinking, not that they can recite the Gettysburg Address. So what's the point? Did we answer that? Because why should anyone on this show care about this?
And so this question here is getting to Jubilee's earlier point about the going out and people asking basic geography. Like, I don't know, that stuff is, some of it's probably doctored. Maybe 9 out of 10 get it right, and they only show you the 1 out of 10. It's probably more like 7 getting it wrong. So the question is, especially in this moment of like hyper politicization, like hyper tension, the culture wars, just everything that we're going through now as a society. Like immigration is at the forefront again. Always talking about civil rights, like why? And then we look at these dismal scores on U.S. history and civics, like beyond basic geography. Like, why is it important, or is it not? For young people to understand, or for us to have a shared understanding of what this country is about, the good and bad, everything in between. Like on one side, you might have people that are trying to convince you that, slavery wasn't really all that bad, right? And on the other end, you might have people trying to convince you that all white people are racist, to their core.
I mean, that the former is definitely what Texas is trying to do. Literally, that is. So they're trying to actually get rid of the word slavery.
Yeah, they
changed that they were. What was it? What was the term that they were using? Like,
well, they went beyond indentured servants.
Indentured servants.
Well, they went beyond indentured servants.
They created a new word.
It's something like unconsented workers or something like that.
There were very happy slaves. These people were happy. They were fed, but it was terrible. It was egregious. But here's why I think we should.
Question.
Why is civics or U.S. history an important subject? One, you need an electorate that has. I mean, we just can't be plumb dumb, man. I really think that this matters in where we stand in the world. And there's a reason that over the last 50, 40 years, America has gone from having a lot of respect to being called like dumb Americans it's an insult almost everywhere outside of this country. I think that's one. I think too, man, like, we students that are graduating and going to U.S. public high schools or private ones, wherever, like as Jubilee pointed out, that we can't do simple geography or answer simple questions. Like, most of the kids in that situation can't pass the immigrant citizenship test. Like, the citizenship test should be the minimum, like the bare minimum of like, of understanding the country in which you live in. And I just think that history is important, because when you don't know your history, you are definitely doomed to repeat it. Now, that don't mean you're gonna get everything from school. That don't mean you're gonna get all the nooks and crannies, but it should be a launching point. There should be a basic understanding. Like, I do think knowing the Gettysburg Address is important. I was also a poli-sci major, right? I'm also a policy nerd. So hey, take it how you want. I'm loving this show on Netflix called The Diplomat. Most people might find it very boring. I used to want to be like a foreign diplomat and be able to do cool stuff in other countries. But there is world powers exist, man, and empires fall. They all have fallen. And right now, I don't know. Hopefully I don't live through the full fall of the United States, but a dumbass electorate is one of the symptoms of it.
I agree. I definitely agree with that, Charles. And I'm over here thinking about what would be my number one desire, like for my children and for any child that I come into contact with, and it would be critical consciousness, their ability to be critically conscious. And that's first and foremost, right? Because then the world can be opened up to you and you'll know how to weigh. You'll know how to take the information and be like, but why? Or I don't agree with that. Or is there, right? And so now you begin to lead with inquiry versus, just kind of consuming all information that's given to you and never questioning it. And then secondly, the knowledge of history is powerful. It's powerful. It puts you in a position of power. Right? And I think whether it is about our government, right, whether it's about our world, whether it is about a corporation, you want to know the history, because the history, down to the concrete that we walk on a daily basis, there's history there. There's some policy there. There's some law there. There's some stipulation there. There's probably some kind of disagreement there. Right. And so in order for us to be able to be critically conscious, in order for us to be in positions of power and to make informed decisions, whether as, traditional citizens or diplomats or politicians or students or parents or whatever, we need to know the history. Right. So I think, yes. And to your earlier comment, Charles, like it's both and. Yeah, it's 1619 and it's the Gettysburg Address. Like why can't we have, and honestly, like we said last episode, which just seems like it was so far away, but it was just Friday, right? When I went to South Africa, most of the conversation that we had on these tour buses was about the history of the country, because they had to explain the history so we could understand why there were 10 shacks with no running water, with no electricity, why there was so many people begging on the street. It was connected to the history of apartheid. It was connected to, right, government officials making decisions, right, based on skin color, history. So I think that yes, it's a worthy topic. Yes, our children need to know it. My hope is that there would be a more balanced expression of said history, given that we as Black and brown people are a part of the American history.
Yep. And if you look at, this is a great comment too. If you look at U.S. history, or if you teach U.S. history, or if you're learning any kind of history, there are a couple of different ways of learning it. There's a traditional form where you have a textbook and we're going to read it and we're going to answer questions and all the knowledge you need is in the textbook, right? And then there's a world where you can actually research some core facts. We know particular things happened at particular times. There's no question around that if you're looking at a historical timeline. And then you can set students up to consider multiple viewpoints. I think this is this like critique thing that you're getting at, where history can actually be like it should be one of the most exciting classes that students have access to, where you can lay out a foundation of historical documents, right? And then provide students with tools so they can go in and critically analyze them and make up their own mind and their own determination around what people were thinking at the time. This is now going beyond like learning to read, or this is even beyond critical thinking. This is like students creating their own formation of thoughts and analysis and interpretation of historical events. And that starts to then create in their minds and in their communities, ways of thinking what it really means to be an American. And it's going to be all very different. But I do think, we can't, we got to get back there in some way, shape, or form, because those kinds of exercises, that kind of curriculum, those activities in school, they can be very transformational for native born, and also for very important for students that have immigrated here from other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm. But I would arguably say, on the flip side of this comment, it is amazing to see the holistic way that students can actually be empowered by this. So, for example, to kind of talk about what Vita said, Vita, you'd be surprised. Like, when I was teaching Howard Zinn, and some of the stuff from Lives, my teacher had told us. Great book, by the way. Thanks for bringing that up. And the book. And by the way, I'm teaching like 7th grade Texas history. I would finally see the Mexicans in the class be empowered by the fact that we changed the narrative around the Alamo. It was an empowering moment for them to be like, oh, we're not the villains. And it was an eye-opening experience for the white kids to be like, holy smoke. So we've been fed all these like tales and lies about Davy Crockett and William Barrett Travis, and Travis was a debtor and he left his wife with a bunch of debt in Tennessee and a bunch of kids. Like, why were we told this narrative? And for them, it was extremely empowering and engaging to be like, oh, people are lying to us. Because I'll tell you what about middle school and high school kids. They love the truth and they want to see through the truth, and they will get deeply engaged in a curriculum when there's something fascinating, not only about the curriculum itself, but when they are understanding you're being manipulated. And this is a big thing I have with history and civics. I personally think that the way they write these history books is purposely trying to manipulate children into this, like, we're the very best. Let's shade over the terrible parts, and let's make history fact accumulation versus, as Jubilee very eloquently said, this is an exercise in critical consciousness. It is teaching you how to look at information, call bullshit because you're smart enough to be like, what's the motivation behind this? Who stands to gain and who stands to lose from the way that this story is told? And once you expose kids to that, everyone in this country that's like, we need more critical thought, I'm like, F you. The very people that are screaming, saying we need more critical thought in our schools are the same ones spreading all this BS propaganda in our history classes that are trying to negate critical thought. Bunch of hypocrisy. History is the very best way to teach critical thinking. But once you gain an appreciation for history, you then understand what were the mistakes that we made as a country in the past, and how are we cognizant of how they did this so that we don't do this in the future, or we can sniff it out. Like, we're all, the four of us are kings and queens of sniffing out the bullshit that's going on because we have critical consciousness. And we're like, this got a weird smell test to it. Like all this stuff in Texas with the textbooks and, the prayer in schools, and they passed a law. And like, I was told today that we may have to have a chapin at every school. A chapin, y'all. And that's exactly what we've been.
What's a chapin?
Excuse me, not a chapin. Sorry, a chaplain. A chaplain.
Oh, a chaplain. Oh,
chaplain. My bad.
Like, what the hell is a chapin?
My bad. Chapin's the name of a school in Texas. My words are all fumbled today. A chaplain in school.
I mean, are we talking about a Catholic school? Catholic school. Hey, right on.
No, we're talking
he's talking about public schools.
Public schools mandatorily having to have a chaplain, and I'm like, does that mean that we're going to have a rabbi?
The irony that we're talking about that as we're talking about civics and U.S. history, like civics class would absolutely teach you that. I mean, I know we're coming up on time, but I just feel like listen, man, part of this, is like,
let's do closing thoughts. Charles, you're on.
I'll do this in my closing thought. Part of this, all the great teachers. Like, great teachers will say, you don't take my word for any of this. Like, go and look this stuff up. If you find something different, bring it back and let's analyze it together. That's why the great math teacher is like, hey, I see that you got to the answer. I need to know how you got to that answer. Like, you know what I mean? Like, when you are doing an English class, a good teacher will make you write and do those things. So we just have to have a higher bar. And without the federal government actually setting at least a floor, what we've seen is that people will run rampant left to their left to themselves, and they won't hold a high standard. And you can't just keep going off the faith of people being good and adequate at their jobs and just trust them blindly. Set some standards, and if you get those standards, educators or parents or whomever, those are the floor. You need to rise above that and do better. So I mean, we we can't keep hoping and wishing these problems away. We have to start doing something different, or entertainment will be your only means. Hamilton plays will be your history lesson. And that's sad for everybody.
All right. I'll go next really quickly.
Well, you got to close us out, brother.
Okay.
You know
Okay. Then I'll hold up.
Alexander Hamilton.
Jubilee.
Let the dog go. Oh, my bad. I'm sorry.
Don't talk about it.
It's so
That
bothered by
damn
the
dog
canine.
coming to you every Thursday.
Yeah,
8 p.m., 7
every
p.m.
time.
All right. We're at time. Jubilee, closing thoughts.
Get it together, people. America,
Oh.
get it together. Like that's all I got to say. No, I think it's gonna take all of us. It takes all the stakeholders to make this change. I just want us to be honest about this issue. This is not because of COVID. This is not because of CRT. We as a nation have not been doing well academically in reading or math for a really long time. Yes, we have some bright spots, right? And if we dig a little deeper, we can find those, right? Like I just was reading that English language learners had a bright spot in the NAEP for these recent results. And it was in a district in Fort Worth, Texas. So there's some bright spots, but overall, we really do need to get anchored about what we believe about education and our approach. And like, I hate to keep harping on Common Core, but in thinking about how that all started, it's right this excursion to other nations to see how they were doing and how they were faring and why they were having such great results. And so folks came back with the idea, but didn't necessarily have a good enough incubator to be able to grow that approach well, right? And so here we are, 10 years later, in the same predicament, if not worse. So I just want us to be honest about the fact that we have a lot of work to do, and I believe that we have a bunch of people who care enough in all the stakeholder realms to sit down and have a conversation about what it is that we need, whether it's a national curriculum, how to teach reading, how to ensure that social studies and science are prioritized, and how to get not just our scores up, but our children thinking critically conscious.
Oh,
Yo,
One more.
very cool. I don't know. Well said. I don't want to go off too far. I think that parents should care because to me, social studies and history is the vehicle by which your child is going to learn how to not be manipulated. If kids are able to discern information and realize how information can be used against them, whether it be the news, whether it be at work, whether it be, happening at a local level or a national level, when they start asking the right questions and being able to ask the right questions, instead of just accepting information, think about how that has affected us since 2016. Think about the spread of fake news. Think about people just forwarding these like Facebook and Instagram posts without thinking twice about it, being like, see, like this study shows that like black crime has risen 4,700%. And then you actually look up the study and realize that the study that they used on Facebook or Instagram is fake, a false study that is fake news in order to manipulate you, to manipulate how you're going to vote, manipulate how you're going to treat your neighbor, manipulate how you're going to treat other Americans. America wants to talk about unifying itself. This is the start. Asking critical information about how other people are manipulating my opinion so that you are agentic, as Dr. Charles Cole would always talk about. So you are an agentic person so that you do not get manipulated and you have power over your own mind, your own abilities, and your own actions.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's essentially what it comes down to. And I like the idea of what Jubilee's been proposing is some sense of a national curriculum around our history, right? And I know we can definitely get there, and it's going to look different at a certain point, whether you live in Florida or whether you live in Maine or California or Washington State. And we should allow for some room of, localizing some of this content and some of the standards. But I think in the absence of that, like if we don't have clear history standards, these assessments like the NAEP or even, whatever states are given, we have to take the results with a grain of salt. I think some of the structural issues we definitely should and can deal with by increasing the quality of our state standards around social science. And I'm going to throw in science too. We're not measuring social science and the sciences like we used to. And if you don't measure them, like we said, we're going to lose instructional time in those areas. You're going to lose funding in those areas. You're going to lose professional development. And those areas are just not going to be a priority, right? So I think that's true. And then, the last thing is there was a question around high quality curriculum. And when I was teaching history, like I would definitely purchase, for the school, the standard textbook, right? And it was highly imperfect, but we actually used it as a historical resource document. We looked and we interpreted, we critiqued, and we searched for the bias in the textbook. So there's no perfect curriculum out there. There's a lot of work that needs to be done around improving the materials for social sciences. But I think you can almost look at anything and learn something from it, take something away from it. And I think all of this really matters because in the words of Howard Zinn, you cannot be neutral on a moving train. All right. So thank you for joining us today, South Star Classroom. I believe episode 93 at our new time on Tuesdays, same time, and on Fridays we'll re-air this show and we'll be back in the comments engaging with you all. Thanks for your time. Have a great week, everybody.
Peace.